Hello, in this DCS tutorial we'll go over the more advanced operation of the P-51 Mustang. The P-51's largest advantage over its Axis enemy fighters was its extreme range and good performance at high altitudes. With a range of over 1,600 miles and great performance over 15,000 feet, the P-51 was excellent for escorting bombers far into enemy territory. And in this tutorial you'll see how to take advantage of these strengths of the Mustang. Performance at high altitude can become very challenging, let alone getting up to high altitude in the first place. In order to compensate for the problems of high altitude, the P-51 has a supercharger which boosts its engine to a higher operating level. The controls for this supercharger can be located right here on the engine control panel, and it features a switch which can turn the supercharger on high, low, or automatic, and as well as a test light and an operating light that will let you know when it's working. The switch is usually kept in automatic. The high and low settings are only for malfunctions. At a certain altitude, the supercharger will automatically kick in. So let's climb to higher altitude to see this. A little bit of elevator trim will help. And you want to try to keep your engine power relatively steady, so you don't have to keep boosting it to keep yourself from stalling. The best way to do this is to try to find a consistent climb rate using your climb rate indicator. In this situation, I'm going to try to aim for the 2 on the climb rate indicator. Okay, so here I am climbing above the clouds now, and now I'm just waiting on the supercharger to kick in. To climb to higher altitudes, once you've found a consistent climb rate, it's very useful to get your trim right so you can relax a little bit instead of keep yourself in the same position constantly manually by the stick. So I'm going to do a little bit of aileron adjustment now, and just wait on the supercharger to kick in. It usually kicks in between 15,000 to 16,000 feet for me, but it can happen anywhere between 14,000 and 19,000, somewhere in that range. Okay, and the supercharger has kicked in, and once it does, you'll feel a boost in power. You'll hear a boost in power, and you'll be able to control your plane a lot easier at higher altitudes. Once you level off, you probably want to pull back on your engine power a little bit because it can jump pretty high. And everything higher than this in altitude is just done by doing a steady climb and being patient. Now let's go over some fuel management in the P-51. The P-51 owes its excellent range to its internal and external fuel capacities, with 2 92-gallon wing tanks inside its wings, an 85-gallon fuselage tank, and 2 75-gallon external drop tanks. To view the amount of fuel you have in each of your wing tanks, you can simply look to the right or left of your seat down at the bottom. These are the tanks that you use the most and should be using first if you don't have external drop tanks. As a backup, you have your fuselage tank, which is its meter is located well behind your seat. It's kind of hard to get to, and you can see it there. Using these gauges to judge how much internal fuel you have left, you can judge when to switch to your next tank. However, external fuel tanks have no gauges, and you basically have to wait until your engine starts sputtering to know to switch. To switch your fuel lines, you can simply turn this rotating lever here, and you can see the various wing tanks and fuselage tanks all labeled here, and switch to your external, internal, or whatever. And it's best to use your external fuel tanks first, so you don't waste the fuel that's in them, because at the first sign of a dogfight or the need of high G maneuvers, you want to release them to make your aircraft more agile. To release your fuel tanks, you can use these emergency release levers here, or simply set up the release like you would for bombs to release them both as well. Be prepared to have to retrim your aircraft due to the major change in weight and air resistance. Now let's go over how to descend from high altitude safely. Don't let your airspeed get close to 500 miles per hour, as it can tear your plane apart. This is the P-51's speed limit, if you will. And this is assuming you're not carrying bombs, rockets, or drop tanks. If you need to descend over the area that you're at, and you're in no rush, you can simply do a spiraling motion, a slow turn, while going down. This turn can be sharper depending on how fast you need to descend. To descend even faster, you can add a slight bit of flaps in order to act as an air brake to slow you down so that you can move at a steeper angle. Adding some aerial maneuvers can also break up your speed and keep you from going too fast. If you're in an emergency and need to get down extremely fast, you can add a snap roll to your dive to slow you down. To perform a snap roll, you simply pull your stick back and to one side while reversing that direction with your rudders. Once you're in the snap roll, you can simply push the stick and rudders back to the opposite direction and hold it there to get yourself out. This is a maneuver that should probably only be done at higher altitudes, because you can lose a lot of control and completely stall if you don't know what you're doing. Keep in mind that a snap roll also can't be used too close to the limit, as it adds too many G's to your plane, and it especially shouldn't be done with bombs or anything heavy on your wings. Now I'm just going to bleed off a little bit more of my speed in a turn, and you can see I'm safely down low now. Now let's go over some of the extra systems and emergency controls in the P-51. First up, you have your oxygen controls, and right here you have a dilution knob and an emergency oxygen knob. And in the case of a failure for your oxygen system, that's what you want to use, is the emergency oxygen knob, as the P-51 has a backup tank. Right here you have your recognition lights key, and that goes along with your recognition lights that you find on the electrical control panel. And in front of the control panel you have your circuit breaker reset, which you should use in the case of any electrical failure to try to correct that. Besides that, the P-51 has a very primitive but useful radar system, and this is basically installed in the tail and will alert you to an enemy aircraft following you at a relatively close range. And once it's on, once it's warmed up, it's pretty useful, although it's mainly for higher level altitude flying. At low altitudes, it will be set off by the ground itself. I have used this before, and it is pretty useful. Whenever there's an enemy aircraft behind you, you'll hear a bell ringing, and the light to the left of your gun sight will come on. To the left above your trim, you have your manual radiator and coolant controls. And the radiator controls can be pretty useful for takeoffs or running your engine on the ground a lot to keep it open and keep your engine cool. And over here you have your radio for the P-51, which is relatively simple. You simply have preset channels and can't really change the frequencies in flight. So you just have to remember which channels have the frequency. Up here in the front you have this horizon indicator. Once in flight, you want to fly your plane horizontal with the horizon itself and set it so that you can use it in clouds or in the dark to be less disorientated as to where you are. Well, that's it for this DCS tutorial and for all of the basic P-51 tutorials. I hope this has been helpful.